live and direct from anywhere in the world. It's The Kelley Show with Dr. Kelley Mondesire.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Kelley Show. Real people with real stories in real time. And I'm Dr. Kelley Mondesire. I'm the host, of course, of The Kelley Show. And today I want to share one fun fact with you about myself that you most likely didn't know. And that is, I have trekked and hiked through a jungle in Cambodia. And that's another story for another episode, so stay tuned for that. And so today I have a very, very special guest. He is brilliant. He's an amazing artist. He's known as the Gentleman Artist, and his name is Cameron John Robbins. So welcome to the show, Cameron. Come on down, come into the studio.
I'm great. Thank you for having me, my darling.
I'm thrilled that you decided to come onto the show and share your story and your gift. I mean, you are so talented. And you were born in a very, very cold place. Can you tell me a little bit about where you were born, who you are, and how you came about being an artist?
Very cold place. I was born in Adak, Alaska, which is a tiny, tiny island out in the Aleutian chain. The only thing there is a Navy base. And that's why I was born there. My father was in the Navy.
I think we have a portrait you did of your father. Wow. There you go. Lieutenant Alan M. Robbins. Wow, that's amazing. So please, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Do continue.
No, it's okay. I have no memories of the place. I've never been back. I was only a few months old when we moved on to the next duty station.
And did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
Yes, I always knew I wanted to be. I wasn't always sure that I could do it, because anybody who says they want to be an artist tends to get the speech from usually well-meaning people that ask questions like, well, that's nice, but what are you going to do for a real job?
There are some amazing paintings you were standing in front of in your studio. And we've talked about this a little bit, and I wish for you to share with the audience, our viewers, your founding fathers and historical figures, and why these particular portraits you have in the background here of George Washington, and who's the other fellow? Is that?
Well, here we have Rembrandt.
Well, I know that's Rembrandt. Well, who's the fellow on the other end?
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Can you tell us why the portraits, the backgrounds are unfinished? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Firstly, George Washington here. When I was a teenager, we went as a family to Washington's Crossing State Park, and there they had a reproduction of a very famous unfinished portrait of George Washington by Gilbert Stuart. And there was something about the raw energy of that unfinished portrait. The face was finished, everything else was in the process of being worked on, and it just never got finished. There was something about the immediacy and energy of that impacted me profoundly. So when I decided to paint a portrait myself of George Washington, I decided to do a very deliberate homage to that portrait by Stuart.
Oh.
And so the details of how this one is unfinished is directly taken from Stuart. The face is different, but I was very deliberately referencing Stuart's work.
Wow.
I paint portraits of historical people. A lot of them are connected to a chapter out of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, where he talks about his imaginary board of directors. And years ago, when I was rereading that, it suddenly struck me, wait a minute, I'm a painter. I can paint my imaginary board of directors. And
that's some board you got back there.
And so that's how a lot of them get selected. That, one founding father led to another among people from many other areas, but a lot of them are personal heroes, people I admire.
And so tell me, how did you come about being known as the Gentleman Artist? I mean, I know you personally and you are a true gentleman, but how did that come about?
It means a couple of things for me. I don't know what it means for anybody else, but it means a few things for me. First, it's a reminder of what I'm aspiring to, a standard of behavior that I try to model. Secondly, it links me to a tradition of portrait painting that I embrace. So I'm deliberately an anachronism. I'm not part of the modern conventions of portrait painting, whether that's experimental or abstract, or even representational. I look to the old masters very deliberately, very directly, and I don't really care much about anything that's been produced after, say, 1920.
Oh, okay. And let me ask you a question. Why portraiture and not a different type of genre of painting, such as plein air or landscaping? How did you fall into portraiture specifically?
An artist has to follow their attractions. If I wanted to make my life easy and making a career as an artist easier, I'd make landscape paintings. But I just have overwhelming apathy for landscape paintings. Everything I've ever done as an artist has been people-oriented.
All right. Well, speaking of people, okay, we have a treat for our viewers today. While I am going to ask Cameron what speaks to him when he creates a portrait of an already famous person, our mastermind in the back, my wonderful producer and engineer, Gareth, is going to put up some of Cameron's work. So Cameron, tell us what speaks to you when you decide to do a portrait of, say, an already famous person.
A lot of it is instinctive. It's a feeling, it's a vibe that I'm responding to something.
Wow.
But there are patterns that have emerged over time. I call the portraits that I paint hero portraits because there's a peculiar way of representing people that I am striving for, and consistently the pattern has emerged. This is kind of just what I do. I'm striving to capture or to crystallize a heroic or inspiring vision of each person I paint.
These are magnificent. Wow, look at this one. Wow.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. He's become a very dear friend of mine.
No kidding. Wow. What does OBECMTT mean?
I'm not sure about CMTT, but OBE stands for Order of the British Empire.
Wow. Wow.
So he's received official honors from Queen Elizabeth II.
Wow. Oh, look at Patton. Wow. Yep. Look at his gaze. That's amazing. Yeah. I wonder what he was thinking about.
I don't know, but I wrote a fanciful little story to go with this portrait that you can find on my website. I've done that for a couple of my paintings.
There, wow, look at that. Dr. King, wow. That's amazing. That's such a strong, soulful portrait. It gives me chills. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you if you would share with the audience, our viewers today, what is your creative process when you're commissioned for a portrait? How does that work? Tell us all about that, because that I want to know. How do you do that?
Okay, well, when I'm commissioned, the client is the one in the driver's seat. So I have long discussions with them, trying to help develop a vision of what they're looking for. So I ask them questions such as, how do you want this portrait to make you feel? How do you want it to impress other people? Do you know where you want it to go? Does that impose any size limitations? Things like that. So are there any examples of portraits that you particularly like and would like me to strive to replicate or imitate? So when it's a commission, it's up to them. It's very much up to them, and it's for them. So I'm striving, I call it a magic mirror. I'm trying to create a magic mirror for my clients so that on the good days, it's a celebration of all that they've already accomplished. On the bad days, it's an inspiring avatar that beckons them on to continue fulfilling their potential.
Wow. And in these series of photos that Gareth is putting up, we see the different stages of creation. Can you tell us a little bit about the different slides that are coming up in your stages of developing this masterpiece? And they are masterpieces as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure our audience would agree.
Thank you. Well, when it's self-directed work, I'm at liberty to do whatever I want. And so even in selecting the picture I work from, in the case of, historical figures, they haven't taken any selfies recently. So that's where that intuitive response comes in. I go through as many pictures as I can find of someone, say, like Dr. King, and I'm just looking for the thing that hits me emotionally, that makes me say, that's the one. Now, whether I leave it unfinished, as I did here with Dr. King, in the same way that I did with the Founding Fathers collection, or do a fully finished environment like I did with Patton, that's also kind of intuitive. Sometimes it's a narrative device, like in the case of Patton. He's standing in Belgium, in the region of one of his greatest victories during World War II. In the case of Dr. King, I love the unfinished approach because it puts so much emphasis on the face, which is the point of a portrait. When there's a lot of detail, for instance, the portrait of Andrew Ramroop, OBE, he wanted all the detail in his environment. And that's great. That's part of his story. That's part of the narrative. But it also presents a challenge as an artist to wrangle all of those details, all of those colors, so that it remains a portrait where his face is the point and the focus of the image. And so I played a lot of tricks in that portrait in particular, to keep the emphasis on his face in spite of these masses of details.
And as we can see from the process, from a photograph or a sketch, the process in which you start to add the medium, you start to add the paint, and it's just a beautiful sequence of events of artistic creation. I mean, it's just, I am awed. I myself have a master's degree in fine arts, and honestly, I'm awed by your gift. But you don't just paint. You are also a magnificent sculptor, and your works are off the charts beautiful. Can you tell us, please, what would be your medium in sculpture, your preferred medium? Would it be clay? Would it be wax? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Do tell. Share.
It's clay. It's plastiline clay.
Oh, okay. And what is your process of the three-dimensional art?
What do you mean by process?
Well, three-dimensional is different than the two-dimension of paint. So do you spend hours on a piece that you're sculpting, walk away and come back and turn it and think about it? Like, what could you share with the audience that might not know how sculptures are created?
Yeah, well, you hit on something that applies to painting and sculpture for me. The staring and thinking phase is a major part of the process. There's a very real kind of dialogue between the artist and the work. And you frequently have to just let them alone for a while and wait for them to tell you what they need next. In the case of sculpture, I'm much faster at sculpture than I am at painting. And all of my sculpture is produced with the expectation of molding and casting it in bronze. But you work with clay to create the original. And I've always played with clay from my earliest days, but it was much later that I discovered plastiline clay, which doesn't dry out. You don't fire it. It stays pliable forever. And when I started sculpting with that, with the idea of creating sculpture that would be molded and cast in bronze, I felt like a fish that had been put into water for the first time.
Oh, wow.
There was a resonance and an immediacy, and I just got it. Up to that point with painting, I frequently felt like I was groping in the dark. When something worked, I wasn't sure how it had worked, so I wasn't sure I could repeat it. If something didn't work, I wasn't sure what had gone wrong, so I wasn't confident I could avoid it. And then I discovered sculpture. And I was getting exactly what I wanted, and I knew how I'd gotten there. So that was really exciting.
Wow, that's great.
Made me a better painter because I'm a tactile learner. So by creating faces in 3D, when I moved back to painting, creating the illusion of 3D on a 2-dimensional space, I knew tactilely what the other side of that illusion would be like.
Wow, that's great. So let me ask you a question. What future ambitions or ambitious projects do you have in mind? I know you told me, but you have to tell our viewers what you're planning. This is pretty cool. Huh.
I am super ambitious, and I only think big. For more than 20 years, I have been obsessed with creating the most magnificent chess set the world has ever seen, where you're playing with statuettes. So 12-inch pawns, 24-inch kings and queens, platinum, gold, encrusted with gems, played on an enormous table with tile mosaic tops. I lie awake at nights dreaming of creating this thing.
Wow.
I now have concept artwork finished on a website where people can see what I have in mind, because it's a very ambitious project.
Wow, that's amazing. That's like, wow, I can't wait to see that when it's done. So I have a question for you. We have a tradition on the show.
Yep.
If you could name a person, place, or thing or experience that you are thankful or grateful for, who or what would it be? And Gareth has already jumped the gun and put that person's portrait up for us to enjoy. So while we're looking at A. Joseph Ghali IV, do tell why.
Yes. And this is Joseph is one of my very best friends in the world. My parents adopted him. He's actually a brother.
Wow.
Not legally, but in everything but. He's been adopted into the family. He was my agent at one time. And early on, he said to me what has been one of the most useful things anyone has ever said to me. He said, "You are not as good as you think you are, but I believe in how good you're going to be." Mm-hmm. Kind of hard to hear at the time, but it's like one of those things. Tell me something that'll make me happy and sad at the same time. The expression of confidence that he followed it up with is what made it so useful. Maybe I needed to be taken down a peg or two at the time. Or maybe I've always seen so far ahead in where I would be, as if I already was, that I was blind to the in-between stage. I don't know, but it's been one of the most useful things anyone's ever said to me. And I'm deeply grateful that he said it. And he's still my brother.
Well, I'll tell you this, Cameron. I know one day soon I'm going to go into the National Gallery with you. Hopefully, we'll make that a field trip. And we're going to be looking at some magnificent works of art on the walls, and yours is going to be there. One of your, or maybe more than one of your works of art are going to be there, or in a castle, or, I don't know, some magnificent environment. Certainly that chess set, I definitely want. I want VIP to that show open. So listen, everyone out there in our audience, you've been privileged to see Cameron John Robbins, the gentleman artist, today, and learn about his process, who he is, a fabulous, talented, gifted, wonderful individual who I'm honored to call friend. And if you would like to reach out to Cameron directly and commission a portrait, which I think would be a fine idea, We're going to put up his contact information for you today. And Cameron, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show. I love you to death, and we'll touch base soon. And folks, thank you for tuning in to the Kelley Show. And if you would like to be a future guest on the Kelley Show, we have our contact information. Write us in, send us an email, give us your name, where in the world you are, what your story is, and why you would like to be a guest on the Kelley Show. So we'll put that contact information up on a slide. But in the meantime, stay tuned for next week. I've got a very, very special guest coming on with an incredible story. And as always, it's a secret because you've got to subscribe to the Kelley Show. And so, meanwhile, peace and love. Gareth, take it away.
If you would like to be a guest on The Kelley Show, send us an email with your contact information, where in the world you are, and a brief description of the story you'd like to share today.